All right, welcome back to SketchUpTalk, the SketchUpiest podcast available in the podcastiverse ever. I think that's a fair statement, even though it doesn't mean anything. I'm your host, Aaron, and with me today is Casey Grothus. I didn't even check this. Grothus?
Yes.
Okay. I was 90% sure, but...
Yeah, a lot of people get it wrong, but you're not one of them.
I got one of those names too, so I get diets in a lot, and so that's great. So welcome, Casey.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Casey is the manager of Project Spectrum here at Trimble SketchUp. So let's start right there. I mean, can you tell our listeners about Project Spectrum?
Certainly. Project Spectrum started actually back at the Atlas software days, so it goes back a ways.
Wow.
It was in a small office above a Starbucks on Pearl Street. And there was a small startup called Atlas Software. They made SketchUp, and it was great. And started getting some mail from, someone who didn't fall into their typical customer demographic at the time. And that was people on the autism spectrum. They really liked SketchUp. And Atlas didn't quite understand why. This is an architectural professional productivity program. It's not some sort of video game that typically appeals to the autistic mindset. So they were curious as to why this was. So they called up the local Autism Society and asked them, why do people like this? And that was sort of the birth of the question. Why do people on the spectrum like SketchUp? Mm-hmm. And the Autism Society took a look at SketchUp and said, well, it's a very visual program, and people on the autism spectrum tend to be very visual thinkers. So it meshes really well with their way of thinking. So Project Spectrum got started when they started asking people on the autism spectrum to come by the office and give SketchUp a try.
Oh. So that was actually part of, so you're talking Atlas, that's pre-Google sale.
Yep.
We're still startup. We're still trying to figure out what it is. And they find out that there's this entire user base that they hadn't even thought about.
Yep. A very small user base, because at the time SketchUp didn't have a free version of SketchUp Make. It was still a $700 productivity software. So a very small user base, but it was there. They were just kind of curious about that.
Wow. So I didn't know that. I mean, I have to admit, I kind of have an idea of what we're doing now, but I didn't know that the history went back that far, and that we've maintained that Project Spectrum piece through all acquisitions and transitions.
Yeah, it's been kind of crazy going through Google and being part of that for a while, and being part of a startup and being part of Trimble now.
I think it says a lot to the values of the SketchUp group, though, to keep that going. So it'd be pretty easy to drop that and so let's worry about this other software. But to keep that going is really cool.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about the people that SketchUp employs, that there's always been somebody who's sort of been a champion for it.
Yeah.
Just sort of internally carrying the torch, so to speak.
Well, because I think before yourself, nobody's had that like as a title, because Barry was, from what I know, before you, he was kind of helping. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you can explain Barry's position with Project Spectrum, because you probably know better. I shouldn't answer questions. I should ask them.
On paper, Barry's my boss. Mm-hmm. He is the one who signs my paycheck at the end of the week. Well, end of the pay period, I should say. That's true. Anyways, he's a great guy. He's sort of championed Project Spectrum for a while, but he's sort of been taking a backseat role to things lately and letting me sort of figure it out on my own. He does a lot more than that. Sounds like he does, but he's a good guy. He's the one who helps us coordinate with HR when it's time to bring on an intern. He's sort of the champion for it. He's my go-to person if I need something. I ask him, hey, is this in our budget this quarter? He does a lot for us.
That's cool. So let's talk about what your responsibilities are with Project Spectrum. So you did mention interns. So
yes, we have an intern program nowadays, thanks to a budget increase we got when Trimble acquired SketchUp. So I was actually the first intern through that program.
That's a good start.
yeah, very good start.
So what is that? So do we always have a Trimble lost my words there for a second. Do we always have an intern going, or is that something that we cycle through?
It goes in cycles. We try to always have one going, but we don't always meet our goal. We do our best, and we've been averaging about 3 out of 4 in terms of when we have an intern going. 3 out of 4 quarters.
Oh, okay. So what exactly? So the person we bring in is
someone on the autism spectrum,
okay.
Preferably with some technical skills, either in SketchUp or in computer science.
Okay.
We've been trying to do more computer science-related interns lately because they have a broader set of skills that they can bring to bear on software development, which is what we do at SketchUp.
That is kind of, yeah, that's, at the end of the day, I guess that is what our responsibilities are. So what kind of position, or I guess the term responsibility is used, but what are the responsibilities of an intern once they get in here?
That depends on the intern and their skill set. We've had one intern who was working on some mobile VR stuff with Google Cardboard. That project never went anywhere, but we didn't know that at the time, so we started developing for it. And he did some really interesting work with Unity, the game engine, trying to get SketchUp models in there and set them up kind of like a video game where you could walk around through various files.
Oh, that's cool.
And he actually got a functional prototype of the app working and was working on getting more and more stuff imported into it, getting the scene set up. And then the project died. And he had to move on to something completely different.
Wow, that's cool. So you mentioned you were the first intern who came in. So what was your responsibilities when you were interning?
My responsibilities were to learn sort of the internal structure of Trimble and SketchUp as best I could so that I could better assist the next intern.
So you helped create the intern program as an intern? In
a way, yes.
Wow. That's like just setting up a legacy right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Probably didn't know that at the time, I'm sure.
Oh, no. At the time, I just thought it was going to be a fun intern job.
So Project Spectrum is more than just internship. There's actually
the primary focus of it these days is classes we do. We try to do one every quarter. Sometimes we don't quite hit that, but we aim to do one a quarter.
And that is, again, for people on the spectrum to come in.
Middle school and high school students, typically, for local school district. We try to get out there and show them how to use SketchUp as best we can.
And that's actually, you personally take a part in that. You get to actually go do those classes.
Yes, I actually studied in college to be a teacher, so it's nice to get the ability to dust off my teaching credentials every once in a while.
Actually do what you went to school for. That sounds cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
I think there's a lot of people who, not just yourself, but end up in the software arena who maybe were intending to go somewhere else.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it's always a growing industry, right? Always bring new people in. Well, so you mentioned that you were going to school for something else, for teaching. How did you find out about the internship? How did you actually get in here?
Well, I was in college at the time. A single class, I should say. I was taking a class at Front Range Community College because I was actually unemployed. Oh. So I was trying to further my skill set a little bit. And I just got a call one day from Barry, who I knew from being a participant of some of the classes that Project Spectrum does, that there was an internship available, and being unemployed at the time, I applied for it. Prior to that, I'd been working at a tool shop doing, I say tool shop, it's more of a tool assembly line. So I worked in packaging there, and that was kind of a dull job. Yeah. Paid well enough, but not exactly mentally stimulating.
Yeah, I would imagine, knowing you as well as I do, that was probably not fulfilling.
It was very physically demanding, having to run things across the factory floor, push big carts around, carry a bunch of boxes. But it wasn't mentally driving me, and I always want to be mentally stimulated when I'm working on something. I want to be thinking about a problem and trying to solve it.
That's definitely something you want to get out of something you have to go do every single day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how much SketchUp use do you get to do as part of your everyday job?
Well, that depends on what we're working on for Project Spectrum. I have to maintain familiarity with all versions of SketchUp because I want to be able to teach it to the students. And there's no telling if a student's going to have the web version or the desktop client or whatever they're going to be working with for the class. So I have to be familiar with that. So I get to, whenever there's a new update, I get to take a look at that to try to maintain some familiarity with various extensions as well. So whenever there's an update, I try to take a look at that as well. And sometimes I'll model something on the weekends if I'm bored. But I don't get to do a ton of SketchUp for my job right now.
Yeah.
Right now I'm working on some other projects, can't say what.
And I'll say one of the things that I appreciate is I get to have you come help co-host when we do live modeling on Friday.
Oh yeah, that's a ton of fun. It's one of my high points of my week.
It's been great. Oh, I told you this too. It's been great having you because we did have, when we started modeling, we actually had a dedicated videographer. He would co-host, and that was great to have him. But when he moved on, we kind of didn't have someone. So we would poll internally, hey, who wants to come hang out for a couple hours and help live model? And we had mixed success there. We had people who couldn't dedicate the time or maybe didn't like it as much as they thought they would.
So it wasn't for lack of effort on your part. You're a great host.
Oh, I appreciate that. I'll give you $5 afterwards. But it's been great because this has been you've actually had the ability to focus on it and
yeah
know SketchUp too, which has been very, not that, because we had people coming in before who were in different parts of SketchUp. Not everybody here's a SketchUp user.
Just fair enough.
Yeah, it happens.
It takes all types to run a company. You got to have your salespeople sell your product. You
Yeah.
have your marketing team. You got to have your web team. You got to have all the different teams doing all their different jobs.
So I won't fault anybody who's come in and help out. It's always been great, but it's been really nice having somebody who's a SketchUp enthusiast because you do have input and, I do like that extension, or you've been able to answer questions that come up on the comments. So it's really been nice.
Well, thank you. I really enjoy doing it. It's one of the high points of my week.
That it's my favorite part of your job. So when you do get a chance to use SketchUp, just curiosity, so a new version comes out or there's an extension you're hearing about, you want to try it out, well, how do you decide what you're going to model in SketchUp?
It's actually a really good question. I'm a big video gamer myself, so I'll take a look at what my most recent played games are, and I'll try to do something interesting that's similar to what I've been playing lately.
That is cool.
So it can be anything, really. It could end up being all kinds of things. And I've been playing a lot of city builders lately, so I've been doing a lot of buildings, which is great, because that's what SketchUp's designed for in the first place.
Core competency right there. Perfect. It's a good thing. Well, there's never a lack of interesting things or interesting influences from video games.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what's... no, actually, I have a question, but I'll save that. I have more questions for later.
Sure.
Models. So if anybody is listening right now and they have an interest in either taking a class or applying for an internship, what's the best way that they can go about that?
Just send me an email, probably. It's C Grothus, it's Grothus, at SketchUp.com. Just send me an email. We get a lot of resumes, though, and we only have one spot for the internship, so it's very competitive, so not everyone gets in.
And that's usually one per quarter?
And it's usually one per quarter, but sometimes we extend a person and they go a second quarter.
Okay. Wow, so those are the good interns.
Yes. They're willing to stick around for what we're paying them, and they're also willing to continue working on a very complex or difficult project.
All right. Well, that's good. So reach out to Casey if that sounds interesting, or if you want to find out when the next training session will be. Are those always around Boulder then?
They're typically in the Boulder area, yes. But actually next week I'm flying out to California to give one.
All right. So exception to the rule as soon as I said it.
Yeah, there are exceptions. They're rare, but they do happen. It comes down to budgetary reasons for us. Sure. It's expensive to stay at a hotel for a week and get a plane ticket somewhere and back. And then I'm not doing my normal job when I'm out there. So then I'm a week behind when I get back.
All true points.
So it's not a cheap thing for Trimble to do.
Right.
So we don't always get to do them as often as we'd like. Just on that sort of topic, stay tuned for our possible first international one as we get closer to 3D Basecamp.
Well, if you need me to come along, where's it to? Where you're considering?
Yeah, we're looking at Vancouver because we're going to be there for 3D Basecamp anyways.
Wow. That'll be fun. That'll be awesome.
If we're able to get things pulled together in time, then we might be doing a class up there, and that would be a lot of fun. That
would be awesome. So this podcast will actually air before that. So hopefully, if everything's going well, that means people could be seeing a Project Spectrum training in Vancouver in the second, third week of September 2020.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm hopeful.
That would be awesome.
That would be really nice.
Yeah, we should really do everything we can to make that happen. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so we have come to the portion of the show where we dive into your personal relationship with SketchUp in a segment we call. So I like this. So depending, again, like we were saying before, everybody uses SketchUp differently, and some people are avid users, some people use it a little bit, but one of the nice things is we do actually have a lot of people who use it internally. I know I'm going to get some cool answers from you because I've seen the work you do, and it is fun. It is exciting. So, do you remember the first thing you've created in SketchUp?
I don't remember the first model that I made. I think it was a house of some sort, but I remember my sister's first model because she got to look at SketchUp too and was like, I want to make something. She made a house that had walls made of water so she could have fish in them because she was big into aquariums at the time.
Wow, that sounds like quite the first model.
Yeah, never got past the drawing board, obviously, but it was a fun sort of experience with SketchUp, a good use of textures.
I bet aquarium walls. That's also a first. I haven't heard of that.
In all fairness, she was in elementary school at the time, so
unbridled creativity.
Absolutely.
Right? Make anything. Okay, that's good. We'll take that as a good first model. And what is the most recent thing you've modeled in SketchUp?
Kind of a knockoff version of the Sydney Opera House in terms of the structural design. It's got all these arcs and flowing lines to it, but it is very much not the Sydney Opera House. It's based on a piece of concept art I saw someone drawing. I'm like,
oh, cool.
That is really cool. I'm going to draw that in SketchUp now. I didn't replicate it exactly. I used it as inspiration, which is always the right thing to do. Anyone can make a knockoff of something, but to take something and be inspired by it takes a little more creativity, I think.
I think that's awesome because I think I do that. I always wonder if I'm the only one to see something, like, especially a 2D thing, and go, how would I create that in 3D? Like, how would I pull that?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It is. It's great. And I don't feel like I do that often enough because, well, I mean, like you said, there's not always enough time to model.
Oh, of course not.
Well, that's interesting. Will that end up on the 3D Warehouse Complete at some point, or is that just a sandbox thing?
It's just sort of a sandbox thing. Maybe someday I'll post the city that it goes in if I ever finish that.
So it sounds like this is part of a bigger model, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to do sort of like a sci-fi futuristic looking city, and I want it to have some bigger buildings that look really cool. So I'm sort of trying to find various inspiration on the internet for that.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Well, that I hope does get finished because that sounds great.
You and me both.
Yeah. I know that long-term model's like. It's hard to keep steam up sometimes.
Oh, yeah. I feel like some days my models are yelling at me, come finish us.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm like, no, I want to start something new, or I don't have enough time, or I always have an excuse of some sort. That's the great thing about doing a recreational SketchUp. Is you don't have a deadline, you don't have to finish your project, and you don't have to spend a lot on materials for it because it's all digital. That's true, but all of that's also the worst part is that you don't have a deadline, you don't have a reason to finish it. Somebody smarter and famouser than me and who had better English probably than what I just said something about the last 10% takes 90% of the effort. I want to say it's Einstein or something like that, but
I totally agree, because I have a lot of models where I've done them for fun, where they get to a certain point, I'm like, this would probably take an hour to finish. And I never seem to have that motivation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully you can get to that point, and I look forward to seeing your imaginary city. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, me too.
All right. So of all the models you've built, what is the model that has had the most impact on yourself or someone else?
Most impact. It's a tricky one.
It is. One that usually takes a little bit of thinking.
Let's see. Well, there was one that I kind of inspired someone. I was in a class once as a student.
Okay.
And at the end of the class, we all give a presentation on our model at the end of each day. It was a 5-day long class, so at the end of the first day, I sort of presented my model, and it wasn't coming together particularly well, but then the second day I presented, I had more to it, and people were able to start telling what it was.
Oh, that's cool.
And it inspired another student to start thinking about how he would do it, and he started asking more questions in class, and he started talking to me about what I was doing. We kind of connected a little bit.
Sort of a design chain reaction.
Yeah.
That's cool. So what was the model?
It was supposed to be like a bunker in which you'd store everything you'd need to rebuild a biosphere in the event of a catastrophe.
Wow. That's like a real design problem. Like, there are a lot of things to consider there.
Yeah, I had just finished playing Fallout at the time. So
there's the video game once again. That's cool. That's a good game, and that has a lot of potentials for models, for sure.
Yeah. So I was thinking, what would you need in order to rebuild a biosphere? What would be absolute essential objects that you'd have to store there? How would you store them? What would you do with them? How would you preserve them long enough to withstand the disaster outside? All these different questions. And
your own fallout shelter.
Yeah, started thinking about all these different things. And SketchUp's great for that because you can very quickly iterate through designs. Be like, no, I don't like that. I'm going to swap that out for something else.
Very cool. Is that a model you've held on to, or is that a thing that's just kind of...
Yeah, I've still got the files somewhere. It's not great, but... See, that's a great thing about SketchUp is you look back on your files and you're like, no, I could have done that better. Should have done this instead.
That's true. Yeah, you get to see improvement.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, of the models you've created, what's the one you look back at as being the best that you've created in SketchUp?
The best. That's a subjective question.
It is. So that could be your best, or like something specific you did that you're like, oh, I was really proud of that, or. We'll take really any positive emotion tied to the SketchUp model.
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually.
It is hard. I mean, this is the question that I struggle with too, because I think when I create models, I always see where they could be better.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the real answer is probably the best one hasn't been made yet. But
yeah, that's probably true objectively.
Right.
Just looking at skill level.
But I bet there's something that you've created in the past where you're like, oh, that because I didn't know how to do that and then I made it, or accomplishment.
I'm super proud of the Fallout Shelter one, actually, in terms of humor I have in it. I have a couple computer terminals, and they've all got little references and jokes on them inside the model that nobody notices.
Oh. Well, now if I ever do get to see it, I'll have to...
Yeah, and I've got like a sort of story set up where there's this one guy who lives in the shelter leaving passive-aggressive notes on the table to the other people who live in the shelter, and there's a video game cabinet in one corner that has the old test image from when they'd be testing emergency broadcast systems.
Oh.
Just all these little things, and one of the crates in the bottom of the storage depot is a Weyland-Yutani crate from Alien, and
nice.
Just all these little touches that nobody notices or cares about, but I know they're in there.
Well, that's pretty cool. That's an accomplishment to know that your model's a level deeper than just what everybody else sees.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It's fun to be able to slip something into a model that no one else is ever going to notice.
Well, and I think that's something that people do talk about too, is storytelling with models, and they mean like, architectural or landscape, but it's cool when you can actually tell a real story like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. So flip side of that coin, what is the worst model? What's the model you're looking at and you're like, oh, that missed the mark?
There are so many answers I can give to this one, because like you say, I always look at a model and I see all the flaws with it.
But is there one where you're like, that one especially, that one still stings to think about?
I was trying to do a robot once, and I got through most of it, but then I realized I hadn't designed a joint on it that I'd reused in several areas correctly. Mm-hmm. So it had a very limited range of motion, and I was super disappointed when I realized that. And I've never gone back and fixed it.
Did you start over? You just
Yeah, and I never finished that one either.
That's the iterative design process. It's never done. Always working on the next release.
Yep.
All right. Well, the final question, you'll have unique insight to this because you do train people. Mm-hmm. What's the one piece of advice you give to a new user, or the one thing that you see new users do that you think they could improve on?
Pick a project and go for it.
I love that.
It doesn't matter if the project is simple or complicated. Just try to think through how you would do something in SketchUp. And don't stop. Don't necessarily take it all the way to completion, but take it further than you think you should.
Just keep going.
Keep going a little further. Put in that little bit of extra effort. And try to learn something about SketchUp. It's tricky sometimes, especially as a new user. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's another good piece of advice.
Words to live my life by.
Yeah, the undo feature is there for a reason. And memory is cheap. Don't be afraid to save multiple versions of your model.
That may be the best advice I've ever heard on SketchUp. That is absolutely true. I think that there's something that stops people from there's nothing to, it's not like you're rock climbing or driving a NASCAR. It's just you can't hurt yourself modeling SketchUp. Yeah,
someone who runs a YouTube channel, I can't remember who, said there's nothing you can type on your computer that will damage the hardware.
That's absolutely true. Unless you have a fit of rage and throw your mouse.
There's nothing you can type that will ruin your computer. You can always reset back to a factory default and start over. You're never going to damage the hardware.
Yeah, in the case of SketchUp, like you said, undo, which in previous years of this podcast, we've got through what our favorite command is in SketchUp. And that was mine.
That's a good one.
Command Z.
Yeah. Undo is probably one of my top 3 used commands.
Yes. That's good, because I think some people have said things like, 3-button mouse or shortcut keys. Or
those are all good suggestions.
Good ones. But I like the fact that you keyed into basically the mindset that you're learning under. And I think that's probably the most important thing is, have that adventurous mindset and dive in.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to try something weird as a project. The students in my classes, they're all very into video games and very into fantasy books or weird ideas that they have, and they all want to create their own unique little worlds. So they all try really weird things, and they'll ask me a question, I'm like, why are you trying to do that? And then I realize that it doesn't matter why they're trying to do it, they want to do it, and it's my job to teach them how.
That's a great mindset, yeah. That's cool. I think that was actually one of the things that appealed to me about SketchUp was you can make anything with it. Like there's not a limitation. There's no gravity. There's no limitations on what you can put together. Like if you want to see if something could exist in real space, make it. If you find out it can't exist in real space, make it. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, there's some really good SketchUp artists out there who are doing some really interesting stuff with it.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, any last words? Anything else you want to get out there before we wrap up?
Let's see. Not that I can think of.
We covered it all.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely, thank you for, and I really appreciate that. Like I said, this was of all the people who came in, the topics we talked about. This was probably the thing that I had the least information on. So I really appreciate learning so much about your own experience with SketchUp and Project Spectrum.
Yeah, thanks. I'm always happy to talk about Project Spectrum. It's my passion.
That's awesome.
It's what I get to work on every day, and I love it.
That's great to hear. I think a lot of people wish they had that situation too. They could.
Yeah. My job at SketchUp's the best one I've ever had.
That's awesome. I can say the same. I really enjoyed this. It's a great place.
Yeah, it's a nice place to work.
It is. All right, and on that note, we will wrap up. So thank you very much, Casey.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
And thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Thank you.